do not want you guys to get behind. We don't want you guys to feel like you're stuck or whatever and miss out on the lesson. So.
So just to be sure, we would just shout out because I don't see a place to actually raise my hand.
Oh yeah, so if you're online, you just let us know. You just say, hey, what about this? And if we need to finish a thought, we'll say, okay, just 1 second, finish the thought, and then we'll address your question. Or if we can answer it right away, we'll just go ahead and answer it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and continue now. CSS, does anyone know what CSS stands for? Yeah. What does it stand for?
Cascading style sheets.
Cascading style sheets, awesome. Cool. Hold on 1 second, sweet. Okay, so first thing we want to do with CSS, this is just it's not necessarily called a language. CSS is used for design and styling. You're not actually like creating anything with CSS per se. So you're manipulating information that's already been created. So the first thing we need to do with CSS is install it or connect our style sheet. And you do that by writing link. If you want it to populate that, you can push tab. And then in the href, you just write the name of your CSS file. I've already created one, and it's called styles.css. Make sure that you're typing in the same name, because if you typed this as style.css, and then you say styles here, not gonna work. And you're gonna be like, why isn't it working? And it's a hard error to find sometimes. So that's one way you can do CSS, by connecting a style sheet. Another way is by doing a style tag and doing your CSS in here. And we'll show you how this works in just a second. And then the last way is called inline styling. And that's when you actually just say style equals, and then you do your CSS in here. So like color is blue. Like that. So we'll take a look at this one first. And I'm going to call this background color so that we can see it easier. Hold on just a second. Let's just do color. There we go. Okay, so if I did background color, there we go. Background color blue, and it changes the whole thing. This is called inline styling, and it's very tempting when you have a huge HTML file to use inline styling. Do not use inline styling. It's not like an acceptable thing. People don't like to see it. It's bad practice. There's other purposes for inline styling. React like automatically generates inline styling, which you'll see later on in the course. But you should never be using inline styling because it's highly inefficient. But that's what it is. If you hear the term inline styling, that's what it's referring to. Okay, the other thing you could do right here is, so with CSS, you have to select, you have to say, hey, what am I gonna change? So let's first change this just big div that covers the whole thing. Or actually, let's just do the whole body. So I could write body, then curly braces, and then in here, I can give it the style. So if we wanted to say background color, blue, you could do that. And now we go over, and actually let's change it to red so we can see it change. Now our body has a background color of red. So this is selecting it by the element. Let's have Stefan. What's an example of another element on our page? div. Awesome. So if I said div right here. Oops, hold on. Now it just has it background color on our div. Yes, Renate. Yep. This is selecting every single div.
So it's like what?
Cool, yeah. So we're gonna get into the classes and IDs in just 1 second, but you're absolutely right. So the problem here is with elements, this is gonna select every element that is called a div. Or if you do a P tag or an A tag or any sort of element, it's gonna select all of them. So before we dive too much more into that, this way right here is also, it's basically the same as having a style sheet, but in your HTML file. So it's a bad idea because it's just gonna make your page look more cluttered. So you shouldn't be doing this either. But just so you know, that is an option. So the way we will be doing it is with a separate style sheet over here. Okay, so yeah, we know now how to select it by elements. We can select the body, we can select the div, the P tag, the H1. But if we want to be more specific, yeah.
Before you get to that, what's the point of having ref in there?
The href?
No, or rel. Sorry, my bad.
Oh, rel? It just specifies that this link is a style sheet. It's telling it what type of document we're connecting.
So why do you need to do that?
Because if it wasn't here, it wouldn't know that we were connecting a CSS style sheet.
So give me another example of when you would use rel.
I don't know like what else you use the rel for,
You wouldn't. It's
but like if you're importing like Bootstrap or some other thing that's not CSS, you wouldn't need to do that.
okay, so only in CSS.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, take it. Forget it.
Cool. So now let's go in here, and there's two different things we can do to grab specific things. We can use classes, or we can use IDs. Now in here, I've got a class called container. Now, what's the difference between a class and an ID? And I'll have Alex answer that.
What's the difference between class and ID?
Yeah.
Is ID just what the div is named?
So this is a div as well. And one has a class and the other has an ID. So do you know what the distinction is between the two? Okay, yeah, if not, it's cool. The what? Okay, so for a class, you want to use a class when you're gonna be reusing that class. So like if we were gonna have several, let's say we're gonna have several names or people. So we'll say div, this is an Emmet shortcut. If you type in dot and then a name and push tab, it will create it with a class. So I'm gonna make 3 of these. So times 3. Again, this is Emmet. And now it will create 3 divs with the class person. Now, this is an example when you would use a class, because this person will say John, Jill, and Jack, right? So we have 3 people, and let's say we want to style them all the same way. Now we can go in here, and what would I grab if I'm gonna style it? Bud.
What are you styling? Hold on.
So I want to style John, Jill, and Jack. So in my style sheet, what am I gonna use?
The class.
Cool, we're gonna use the class. So if you're gonna do a class, you select it with a period first, and then you just type in the name of the class. So person, and then we're gonna say font size is 30 pixels, color is orange. Now we can save it. Whoops. Go over here. It's not updating, just a second. Okay, cool. Now we have John, Jill, and Jack, all with the same styles. So that's like an example of when you would use a class. Now an ID, it's going to do the same thing as class. You could name 12 things the same thing on ID, and it would do the same thing. But an ID is supposed to be for things that are unique, that you're only going to use once. So if I said ID nav here and here, that is bad code. Yes, it will work, but that is bad code. And an ID should only be used once, and it's going to be for specific things. So an example here would be like, we've got our two things. We've got our nav bar, and then we've got our intro box. And I only want to style the nav bar. So we'll go over here. Actually, let's save this. So we'll go into our styles. Just so you can see both. And I'm going to say pound nav curly braces. And now we can give this a background color of purple. And that is only going to select our nav bar. And then if I wanted to select our intro, how would I do that? Gustavo. And then just give it any style you want. All right, so we'll say background color, green. Save it. There we go. Any questions on selecting using class or ID or the distinction between the two? Awesome. Cool. So let's say that these were both called class box, but they were the same class. So another way that, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we've got two divs and they both have the same class box, but I want to grab the content inside of them specifically. And so I'll say that there's an H1 here just so that we can. So I want to style subworld and hello individually, but there's two H1s, so I can't grab H1, right? Because if I say H1 color yellow, right? That's going to grab both hello and subworld. But I don't need to give them an ID or a class either, but I just want to select them individually. What you can do is you can say, how do you get a class again? Okay, dot box, space, H1. And then, oh wait, hold on. Yeah, it's doing the same thing. Just realized. Just a second. Okay. I mean, yeah. So if you, yeah, let's say these are IDs still. So the ID was nav and intro. Okay, so if they had different IDs, but that's what I was getting at. So they have different IDs, but they're still H1 tags. So if you say H1, it's going to grab both of them. But if you want to specify, then you could say the ID, so nav, and then space H1, and it will only grab the H1 inside of that ID. So
Couldn't we just use box 1 and box 2?
Like for classes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that, but then they'd be different classes. So unless you were going to be repeating box 1 several times, you should have it as an ID. But yeah, so now, let's see. Okay. So why? There we go. Cool. Yeah, so now it's just going to grab just the H1 that is inside of the ID that we specified. Yeah.
So if I missed it or not, is there any reason why we're using double quotes and single quotes on different parts?
Oh, just because this was automatically generated and I'm in the habit of using single quotes. So all the ones that were auto-generated were in double and I had single. It's not going to affect it really, but it should be more consistent. So yeah. Okay. Cool. Any other questions on this?
Oh, wait, I didn't do that thing where you multiplied it again.
Okay, yeah. So this is pretty much the end of the intro to CSS. Just shows you how to like style it, how to select stuff. So I'll show you guys a couple of those tricks with Emmet real quick. And these are things you'd probably want to write down in your notes. So you can get any tag by typing the name of the tag and then pushing tab. So if we want a div, type div and then tab. So you just type, you can do anything, H1, tab. It'll do it. But be careful. Oh wait, never mind. VS Code is better in this way. All right, so if you want to give it a class, you can say the thing that you have. So it could be a div or an H1 or a P, any element. And then you can say dot and then the name of the class you want to give it. So if I said hi, now it has a class called hi. Sometimes you want to give it multiple classes. If that's the case, you just keep tagging them on. And now it will give you a class with all 3 of those. If you want to give it a class and an ID, you just use the pound sign and say that, and it will give you a class and an ID. And if you want to nest something inside of it, so let's say we want to make a unordered list. We'll say unordered list, and then you can say arrow, li, and let's say we want 5 LIs with the class animals. Then we can do dot animals, which is the class for each of them, and then the star, 5, then you push tab, and now you'll get 5 list items, all with the same class. Yes?
Is the unordered list an element, or is each list item an element as well?
There, yeah, the unordered list is an element, and each LI is also an element. So if you want to nest something, it doesn't have to just be a UL or an unordered list. You could say div, and inside this div, I want an H1 tag, and inside that H1, I want a paragraph. I don't know why you would put a paragraph in an H1, but it will do it like that. So the arrow just nests. And that's like a brief little intro to Emmet as well. So you can be more efficient with that.
Sorry for the question.
Yeah.
So for the classes, you can change multiple things. That's why you base not all have reference the same sort of file.
Yep.
Like an example in a page, like if you wanted, I don't know, so you had like about home and something section. Is that like something that all one of those styles?
Yeah, that'd be a great example. Yeah, anytime you have like multiple things in different places that you want to all have the same attributes, you just give them all a class. Yeah.
was a shortcut to get the boilerplate?
Yes. So I recommend typing it out still until you get comfortable with it. But once you're comfortable with it, you can just type exclamation point, tab, and it will create your HTML boilerplate. Yep, so just an exclamation point, and then tab. Huh? Honestly, I don't know like the purpose between because it works without them. Bob, what's the purpose of all the meta tags?
Yeah, they give, I mean, they give that information about like, so like that, meta name report one, that makes it work on the mobile device. So like, we've had students who made their site responsive when they made the browser small, and when it moved it on its own, it didn't work, and that's the meta tag we do now.
Okay, for the online people, the meta tags just give information so that, like, for example, this viewport one allows it so that it is able to be used mobily. And so, yeah, this is all just different information. If you're really interested, you can look it up and see what each thing does specifically, but that's the general use of the meta tags. So it should just be included with VS Code.
So does it work in CSS or
Nope.
HTML?
Just HTML, yeah. There's different like boilerplates for each language that you're going to be using. So like with React, they have one, but with JavaScript and CSS, there's not any like set standard that you have to have for everyone. So they don't have anything like that like sets it up.
Just last thing, I know you showed it, but you know how you put like H1 into a paragraph, a line. How do you shortcut that?
Yeah, so just whatever you want. So if you have a div and you want to put something in the div, you do the arrow, and then you just can put like an H1 inside of that, and then the arrows, it'll keep going deeper and deeper.
So enter.
Yeah, then you just push tab, and it will do that. So all of the Emmet things, you just push tab at the end, and it will create those. You can't put spaces, so if you're wanting to create a div with the class of container, but you're like, oh, I kind of want to name it my container, right? That's not going to work. It's just not going to do anything, yeah.
What if you put the parentheses around it, like you would if you wanted?
Like that? You're talking about quotes?
Quote, yeah, I got it, sorry.
I don't think that's going to, yeah, that's not going to work.
Okay.
Because it'll automatically be putting quotes around it. So if you notice here, oops, it automatically puts it in a class with quotes. But you could put a dash if you wanted. Oops.
You can also do the camel spelling, right, with a capital C?
Yep, you can also do that, camel case. Oops. Also, if you think it's not working, because you like typed it like this and then went back and pushed tab, you just have to delete the last letter. Then it'll work again. Okay. So we have an assignment linked with this. It's basically just your silly CIA again, but with CSS this time. So just 1 second.
Hey, just to be sure, so that's going to be part 2, right? Silly CIS part 2?
Yep, and I'm going to send that out in the channel as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and then we'll push that up to GitHub as well, or to Trello. Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. This is what I like to do when I'm creating a new file for to create a new exercise or whatever. Just go into your VS Code wherever you're at and push Command O, and then you can click up here and just go to your assignments, and if it's an exercise, go to your exercises. Then I go down here and I click New Folder, and I'll just name it. So this one is Silly CIA 2. And then I'll say Create, and then make sure it's there, and click Open.
Do you want this done as a separate?
No, I would just create a second one. I mean, you don't have to. If you want to add it to it, you can. But I like to just keep them everything separate, personally.
So how about index HTML in Silly CIA part?
Yeah.
Should we keep that together? Style sheet?
Yeah, I guess in this instance, maybe just add a style sheet to that same one. But for the future, whenever you're creating a new one, you can do that, and it'll open you right into the folder. Then you can just push Command N and then Command S and just add in your files like that. So Command N, Command S. Oh, there's a styles.css now. And then you have everything created inside your exercises folder. That's the most efficient way I've found for creating new exercises. That way you don't have to go in and mess with everything in Finder or in Terminal. You can just do it all really quick and be in that folder. So.
So I still call family and then use commas and position. And this is in quotes just because there's so many words to it, right? Okay. I probably was thinking.
Marcus, did you talk to them about autosave at all? Yeah. So what I'd recommend doing for everybody really quick, in VS Code, like click into VS Code and hit Command comma. That'll bring up some settings. And then do you see this one that says files.autosave off? So you hit Command comma in VS Code. It'll bring up this like JSON file of user settings. And there's one that says files.autosave off. Does that show up on yours? Yeah. So copy that, files.autosave off, copy it. Over here on the right, after like your zoom level, or do you have this, or do you have anything showing up there? Just empty brackets. So inside the brackets, just paste the files.autosave off. Or if you do have something there, just add a comma at the end of the previous one and add it. But change off to after delay with a capital D, all one word. So now you won't have to, once you do that, it will save your files every time you make a change after like a really short delay. So you won't have to worry about Command S or refresh your page. Like, why didn't my change happen? Oh, I forgot to save my file. Like, you won't have to do that anymore. Yeah, once you're done, you can Command W or hit exit or whatever. Or ironically, you have to save that file manually. Okay, also, can I get a raise of hands for those that have one of our computers, but not through GI? Right. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Just the 4 of you. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Command and then push L. Yes. Hold command and then do L.
That's it. Paragraphs, is there general I tried that, but it didn't.
2:45. We're going over an intro to JavaScript.
So,
Questions here? It's not looking like I'm doing it according to the demo here. One of the issues I'm having is that even though I put a line height property of 25, it's still not going down. So I can put that line height, yeah, under a class called content right here.
okay, so let's grab content over here and see what it's doing. So that's what line height does.
Right.
It suggests how like big. So what are you wanting it to do specifically?
Well, the directions say specifically 25 pixels, right?
Okay.
And so, even though I have 25, it's just not appearing the same as the demo.
Okay, so
I think it's just like one tab over the, yeah, so the next tab.
oh, I see. Okay, so you're meaning like it's a little higher than that?
So where the 1947 ends up there and then Langley ends up there.
Oh, that's just probably font size thing.
Okay.
So
Sorry, it's like the next.
okay, so there's a couple things you can do here.
Mm-hmm.
Like first, the div container. You probably want everything to go in that side of that.
Okay.
So let's go to the code and we'll grab this div container. Oh, that's a fun little.
Yeah. Oh, you saw that? Yeah. Have you seen that before? There's like all kinds of ones, like flames, like fireworks. Because code can get dry.
And then what was your beautified? Was it just Command B?
Its control should be, yep.
Cool. Sweet. All right. So let's go over here. Okay. So now you can go to container.
Okay.
And go over here and say width.
Or width.
And let's make it like 50%. So that's just grabbing that guy. Oh, it's going to be refreshed. There we go. Let's see if it. Okay, there's still things not inside of it. Go for it.
Shortcuts. I just got a request on it, so before I get your teaching game, I want to ask.
No, totally. It's great. Okay, so we just want to make sure this dude's there. Dude's there. Oh, that's weird. I mean, it's grabbing everything.
So is it because I have two, like a nested div almost?
I think that's it. Probably put this in here. So now it's just like one div containing everything with a bunch of divs inside of it. So that should be, looks like. There we go. Okay, so now we should be able to grab container width. Let's try 50%.
Okay.
Now we'll squeeze it a little bit. Then you could say something like margin auto, and that will center it.
Sweet.
And then you can just go in and make adjustments to each little thing, right?
Yeah.
So like, for example, we got, probably take out the breaks here in the image. Rather than giving it a height, you can just adjust the width, and that'll keep it square.
Oh, beautiful.
So now you can just go and tell,
Oh, that's sweet.
right, when 47 is there or whatever.
Kind of.
Right? You can kind of mess with it, and then you'll also want to mess with like, so Probably content. Font size, say 20 pixels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, oh, okay.
Gotcha.
Oh, now it's kind
Right.
of there, you know,
Cool.
if you want it down further,
Right.
you can do that, you know,
Right.
and kind of mess with that stuff. So,
Okay.
like, this isn't going to save unless you copy it over.
Yeah. I don't want to
But-
refresh it.
But use the dev tools to your advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you saw how much quicker it was to do all these edits,
Yep.
and then you
Mhm.
can just go copy them over.
Yep.
Whereas if you're doing it on the other side, you're like
Yeah,
guessing,
takes a
checking
while.
1,000
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, right. Cool. Another question I had was I added something where I wanted to, as I hover, I would like to have that link underlined instead of that text.
Mhm.
And so I put div HA hover.
So you don't want that dot there. Oh, like that.
Oh shit! I don't want to refresh everything. I'll keep messing with it.
Yeah, but so the dot, you don't need to do a dot for A. It's
Mhm.
just space because the A is an element.
Okay.
So it's going to find the A
Dot
inside
was
of the div.
for class. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Yep.
CSS? Yep. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go over a quick intro to JavaScript. If you're feeling overwhelmed with lots of material and lots of assignments, that's normal. This first week, since we go through HTML, CSS, and like kind of an intro to JavaScript, it can feel overwhelming. But if you just kind of, I'll send you out this real quick, actually. Okay, so in Slack, I'm sending out an article. It's just something you can read if you're feeling stressed or get stressed during the week. It just talks about how to manage a heavy workload, the hierarchy of importance on the things that we're assigning you, our expectations on like what you should get done first, the purposes behind each thing that we're assigning you, and just like has a few suggestions on how to be less stressed out by everything. So we're not going to go over this in class, but if you're feeling stressed, I highly recommend taking a look. Okay. This is another cool thing, and we'll be using this with warm-ups. If you type in your browser, repl.it, so replit is what it's called, but repl.it. Go here, and then you just select JavaScript in the languages. This will be super useful for testing out JavaScript things. So I'll be using this a lot when I teach like functions and different things like that. But yeah, so you know about it, but you probably won't be using it personally until for a couple days. So as a little intro to JavaScript, it was originally created in 10 days by a guy named Brendan Eich. It was named JavaScript, and a lot of people confused it with Java, and Java didn't like that they used their name, so they changed their name to ECMAScript, ECMA script, which is technically what it's still called, but we all call it JavaScript, despite that not being its actual name. Pretty much every company will use JavaScript to some degree or another. So it's a great language you're learning because everybody needs it. Okay. So I'm going to just be going over some of the basic JavaScript terminology and what certain things are. So the first thing is a statement. A statement is anything in JavaScript that is doing something. So if we were to define something, let's say I said var animal equals dog colon or semicolon. That's a statement. Or if I said console log hello world, semicolon, that's a statement. A statement's just like a line of code, essentially, that is doing something. And statements. Okay. Next is a value. A value is basically just data. There's two types of values. There's fixed values, which are called literals, and there are variable values, which are called variables. Some examples of literals are numbers, strings, booleans. What's a boolean? True or false? Cool. Arrays or objects or even functions. These are all fixed values because they're specific types of values. Variables are things that are assigned a value. So, all right, up here where I said var animal equals dog, var stands for variable. You use it when you're creating a new variable. Animal is the name of the new variable you're creating. And then this is the value of the variable. So, okay. And I'll send you guys, or you can look up the write-up on the syllabus. It will have all this stuff. So, again, don't feel like you have to type out every single thing. Okay, so with variables, there's like a few key things that you do. So first, you define the variable. So then you assign it a value, then you use it. So defining the variable is saying var, and then the name that you're going to call it. So var person. Now we have defined the variable. The variable is called person. You could end it right there and push semicolon, and now you have a variable person that you can use whenever. But this variable has nothing assigned to it yet, so it's pretty useless. Assigning it is the equal sign. If there's one equal sign, it is always assigning something. It never means what it does in math. It's not saying like, oh, this is like 2 + 3 = 4, right? It's not that. You're assigning the variable name a value. So whatever comes after the single equal sign is always saying, okay, 20. Now person is equal to 20. That's its value. If I said Tiffany, person is now Tiffany, right? So anything you put after the equal sign is the value now of your variable. So if I said console log, that just prints it off here. That's all console log does. If I say console log person, what's going to print off? Tiffany. Awesome. Yeah.
So like in this example here where you're declaring that person is Tiffany, if you didn't put the quotation marks, does it reassign the variable?
Nope. If you did that, I mean, yes, if Tiffany was a variable that existed.
Like that was already declared, and then it would.
Yeah, so if I said var Tiffany equals girl, right? Then person will be equal to girl, right? But if I don't have this previously stated, then Tiffany is not defined. It doesn't know what you're talking about. The reason we have the quotes is because that's turning it into a string.
Right, because otherwise we should pull again and it's true or false there.
Yes, or so if there wasn't quotes, it would be basically saying, make person equal to the value of this other variable. Because without quotes, it's expecting that to be a variable that was previously defined. Cool. So this is defining the variable. This is assigning it to a value, and this is using the variable. Okay? If I wanted to reassign person to something else, then I could say it, and I don't need to use the var. So I could say person equals Megan now, and now it'll print off Megan instead. It always goes with the latest one because JavaScript reads from top to bottom. Always. Unless you specify for it to do otherwise, which you would do using promises, which I'm not going to get into.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could we put var person and leave it undefined, and then later, like in a function, insert the value? So if someone was logging in their name, then it would automatically go to be the value of person?
Yeah. So you could do that in a function. You could also do it just like this. So if you want to make person something that exists, now it's a variable. Now later on, you don't have to use var. So if I wanted it to be person equals Megan right here, it'll still work, even though we didn't use var right there. If you were doing it in a function, which we don't want to dive too much into functions quite yet, but if you did it in a function, you could do the same thing. You could just say person equals this. You don't have to do var, and it just knows that that is a variable that already exists. So if you have a bunch, you could say like person, hair, animal, I don't know. You could do a bunch of stuff, define them all up there, and then use them later and assign values to them later. But typically you'll just do it right there. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Can you also tell me why on the right-hand side it says undefined?
Yes. So right here, this undefined is referring to what is being returned, which has to do with functions. So the console log is white. Anything that's in green is what's being returned. I'll just show you real quick an example. If I had a function, and I said return 1 plus 1, and then I ran the function down here. Now it just gives us a green 2 because it's returning 2. So the green is what's being returned. It'll show it in white if you're console logging it. But again, don't feel too worried if you don't understand what this is doing, because we haven't really gotten into functions yet. Okay. Any questions on variables?
Other question. Are we going to be using variables throughout the course, or are we moving on to like ES6?
Yeah. So once we get into React, we'll do ES6, but those are still variables. This is just using the keyword var instead of let and const. But yes, we will be using let and const later on. The reason we start with ES5 is because there's a lot of documentation that uses ES5 syntax. So if we were to skip that, then a lot of you would not know what was going on when you looked up older stuff. So, good question. All right. Okay, some of the operators. So we know that var my variable equals 2. So we know that this equals is assigning a value, right? Some of the other operators you can use are arithmetic. So if you do a plus, so I'll console log this, and 4. So the math works just like it would normally. 2 divided by 2, 1. 2 times 2, 4. 2 minus 2, 0. So you can use any math. You can use them together. It follows the same order of operations as it would. So if you do that, that's following the typical PEDMA's order of operations. Another thing to be aware of is when you're making a variable, yeah.
How do you divide?
Divide is just the slash. when you're creating a variable, there are certain words that you cannot use. Let's say I wanted to make one. I'm like, oh, this is a new one. So I'm going to say new. Var new equals house. Whoops. It says unexpected token, line or number 4. So that's new. Doesn't know what that is because that's a reserved word. There's lots of reserved words. There's like import. There's null, undefined. And you'll notice if it's reserved or not, because what are they doing as soon as I finish typing out the word? If I write native, oh wait, I guess that one's not showing up right there. Yeah, they go purple or blue, right? So that's indicating, oh, this is a reserved word. You can't use it as a variable name. We've got a list of these reserved words on the write-up, but you can typically avoid it by just noticing the color change. And your VS Code has that. I don't know if it's blue necessarily, but it'll let you know if it's a reserved word. Another thing is commenting. So in HTML, in CSS, in JavaScript, there will be times where you want to write something, but you don't want it to be part of your code. How you do that in JavaScript is you just do 2 slashes. So you'll notice right here, if I write var animal equals dog, oops, it's all the different colors. But now if I put the slashes in front, it grays it out. So this right here, oops, doesn't know what animal is because this is not being read as part of the code. When you comment something out, it is not being considered. Comments can be used for like indicating with comments what something is doing, where something is, that type of thing. But comments are also used for if you're trying to debug it. So let's say you're trying to figure out where an issue is. So you can comment things out and see, oh, is it still working if I take this out? What happens if I take this piece of code out? That way you don't have to delete it and retype it. You can just comment it out and look at it later. Yeah.
If my code takes up more than one line, how do I get that whole section to be commented out instead of going line by line commented out?
Awesome. Great question. So let's say we'll do it in HTML first. So what you can do is you can highlight, and it'll work like this for all the languages. You highlight everything you want to comment out, then you push Command/, and now all of that is commented out. Then to uncomment it out, you just click anywhere on it. Oh, whoops. You just highlight it again, and then you just push Command/ again, and it'll uncomment it out. So if we're in CSS, say we have, yes, correct. So if we have body, color, purple, if you want to comment out the whole thing, /, you'll notice it's a different syntax. See, this one has like an arrow, exclamation point, 2 dashes because it's HTML. This one is different because it's CSS. And then if we had a JavaScript file, commented out, it's the 2 slashes. If you want to write like a big paragraph and you don't want to put the 2 slashes in front of everything, then you can also do this, the star, and you can say, hi, hello, what up, hey. And then do another star, slash after that, and now everything else will work as code. So single line comment is that. Multi-line is that, but if you want to do multi-line, you can also just select it and push Command/, and it will do that. Okay, last thing, functions. There's 2 ways you'll see initially that a function is written out. The first way is like this. The second way is by declaring it and saving it to a variable. So I could say var add equals function, and now I don't have to give it a name because it was just assigned to a variable. Those are the same. They'll do the same thing. The only difference is that when it's assigned to a variable, it will be read from top to bottom. Whereas here, all of the functions that are written in this way get hoisted to the top of the page. So I'll show you an example of when this matters. So actually, okay, now I'm going to call this add 2 and add 1. Okay, so if right here, before I've written the functions, because we know it reads top to bottom, if I write add 1 and run it, it will give us 4. I'm going to change this one to 5 just so we can see the difference too. But if I write add 2, add 2 is not a function. So when you define it to a variable like this, it is now stuck in its position on the page. It will not be hoisted to the top of the page. So if you try calling it anywhere above where it was written, it will not know what it was. So like, oh wait, so, oh, see, meaning like put this up here? Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. So now I'll do that. Now it says 7. And it's only saying 7. So if we console log these, then it will print out both. Because it will only show the latest return. That's why it's only showing 1. But now it shows 4 and 7. Because first it runs 4, does that, even though it's below it. And then this one, it will do because it's above it now. But if we move it down below, we will see once again, it did the 4, but it does not know what add 2 is because it is below. So that is the main difference between these two functions. Aside from that, they're virtually identical. So, any questions? Yep, we'll do that as soon as we learn ES6. If you want to learn it yourself beforehand, you're welcome to do. If you guys already are familiar with ES6, you're welcome to use it. But if you're not, we will be teaching it later on in the course.
So is this covered in the notes as well?
Yep, so if you go to the syllabus, right here, and you go to Intro to JavaScript, this guy right here, all this information is covered. So you can go look it up and like use it as a review or as a reference whenever you want to. And then right now, if there are no more questions, we're going to give you guys this assignment, and it's pretty easy and quick. Okay, let's see. And then I'll push that up to Trello. Just take a second. All right, that should be on Trello now.
Hey, I just want to make sure we're going to be creating this in our Visual Studio, right? Or right in our terminal?
The hello class assignment?
Yeah.
Let me look at it real quick, just a second. Yeah, you'll be doing that in VS Code. And
Okay.
Then, so I'll show you guys real quick So I'll write a function real quick. Just the one we like showed. And then I'm going to say console log 2 plus 2. How you'll do this to like make sure it's working is if you push Control and then the tick mark below the escape button, it will pull up your terminal right here inside of VS Code. Then you can type node space and then the name of your JavaScript file that you're making it in. So this one is called app.js. So node app.js, do the tab to make sure it's there, and then enter. And this isn't saved, so oh, whoops. And then just run it, and it'll print it off right there. This is such a small assignment that I don't mind if you guys just do it in Replit, but it would be good practice to get it working in your VS Code as well. To get the what?
I'm assuming they were directions or something, whatever is on the board. I mean, I lost the board.
Yeah,
Okay, just use, I posted it in Slack, so just use Slack to get to that specific assignment. Here's like they're outdated on the Trello one. But just use the Trello to like move it over to the spot once you've finished it. Once you've done this, feel free to take a break, like 15-minute break. We're gonna start the next lesson at 3:30. No, this one would only require one JavaScript file. You don't need an index, HTML, or a CSS. So if would only add files that are required for each exercise. So if you're not going to be using CSS, don't put one in there.
So I haven't used this visual studio.
So you can just do like and so you're looking at S, and then you just save it as a like app.js or whatever.
Cool. So you just, I want to make sure I'm not reiterating too much of what you said as I go forward. But where I started, this is covered variables, functions.
Yeah, it's like just basically this. I'll show you real quick. So we'll talk about that. I explained what a statement was briefly. I explained I just mentioned that these are fixed values and that variables are variable values.
Yeah.
But I didn't go into like
Data
data
types.
types. I just mentioned the names of them.
Because data types is today, though, right?
Yeah. So I was like, there's numbers, there's strings, there's booleans, arrays, objects, functions, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't say what they were or anything like that. And then I explained what a variable was, and explained just the general operators, but only like the math ones.
Yep.
Reserved words, comments, and then the difference between the two functions.
Cool. Between a function expression and this is the declaration, right? This is the expression.
I think that's a declaration, and that's the expression.
All right, because it's expressed in a variable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is expressed in a function name variable.
Yeah. But this is an anonymous function.
And this one you get
This is
wasted.
named. But that one gets wasted.
So I have up next then JavaScript code conventions and best practices. Camel Case.
Oh, here's data types. Cool. There's actually one more now.
Really?
Symbol.
Really?
Yeah.
Those bastards.
You only use it in iterators and generators, which are still a little bit beyond me.
Oh yeah, we were gonna make it right before they separated us.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll actually happen this time.
Yeah. Productivity to the max. Maximum effort.
I honestly never felt more fulfilled at work than during those 6 weeks.
I know. This is like super class. Cool. Go over this. Data
Probably even
structures.
combine it a little bit.
Entry there. Oh, this actually goes up to data types.
Yeah.
Do I have to have, in order to call the function, if that close?
Yep.
Can I,
No spaces allowed.
no spaces? Okay. I really had no idea that you can just call a function like that. That's actually extremely helpful because I did not have to do that much in my thing last night.
Pretty fun, huh?
So you're just using the CSS intro file for all this,
Oh yeah. So
or Replit.
yeah, I just used Replit because I didn't really think it was necessary to make a file for the intro crap.
Replit's great for data types and all that too. Anyways.
Yeah. So pretty much anything with JavaScript that's like not going to be teaching a specific principle, just like overview, just like use Replit. And like the upstairs class, when I used Replit for the first time, like 3 weeks in, they're like, "What's this? What is this magic? How is this not been introduced?" It's very fun.
Bye guys, I'm headed back to California. You probably won't need anything from me, but if you do, please only call or text away. Feel free to reach out, but I'll be back in like 6 weeks, and you guys will be so cool. I can't wait to see your projects. Bye.
All right, let's pull this back in as soon as you're ready. Wrap up whatever you're working on. Yeah. Thank you. So let's start. Eye contact. Another.
yeah, all the stuff. All right. Yeah, let's pull this in. So on the train of creating good habits, getting off to a good start, we want to cover some basic code conventions of JavaScript right off the bat. Start on the right foot. So these are some things that you may find opinions for, and others that are, this is how it's done in JavaScript. You may see it typed differently in other languages. But if you do it differently than this using JavaScript, you're going to wonder what you're doing. So code conventions are a little different than syntax, because syntax is very explicit, such as, when you call that speak function, say you wrote, this syntax is exact. You have to write it like that for it to work. Convention, it can be opinionated. There are some that are primary conventions, though, and that's what we'll cover here. So the first is when you're naming things in JavaScript, anything you're giving a name to, the casing that you should use, it's called Camel Case. I heard it. And this is Camel Case. The first letter is lowercase, but any subsequent letter in the string of words is uppercase. So this is a Camel Case sentence. This is like single letters next to a whole word. Yep. So let's say you had a variable called this is my variable. That's how it would look. And that's like if this is a variable, then is a variable or all variable. Just like that. Yep. So this is for a pure plain JavaScript. We're going to play with other casings later in the course, but this is for everything JavaScript going forward for now. We'll be sticking to the Camel Case. So putting it in the context of a function. Let's say you had a function that added two numbers together. You could call it add together, right? And this is how you're going to see it look with the correct casing. So numero uno on the list. Let's write it, Camel Case. There are instances like this in JavaScript where you actually uppercase the word. And this is something we'll go into a little bit later. I think it's next week, but they're called Constructor Functions. And those ones are actually uppercase, so it would look like that. Constructor Functions. There are functions that produce instances of whatever it contains. And these in particular are uppercase because they are something that you are using to make something else. It's not like a function that you're just calling or a variable. So this is one of the times in JavaScript where you'll actually see a uppercase word. But in general, we're using the Camel Case.
So just to clarify, because uppercase in CSS means that every single letter is capitalized.
Yeah.
You mean capitalized, right? Where the first letter is capitalized.
Yes.
The rest of them are.
Right. Where the first word is not capitalized, like the wouldn't be, but first word, these would both be uppercase or capitalized for the first letter.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Cool. Also in JavaScript, Whitespace, which is this, there's nothing in it. It's there, but it doesn't represent anything. JavaScript doesn't read that. It skips over it. It pretends like it doesn't exist. So you can actually, let's see, Whitespace. You can write your whole everything on one line. So let's, you may not have seen conditional statements yet, but let's say we had a conditional statement here that was checking if something, the value of this x, and if so, it's going to console.log that variable, else console.log it was not true. So this is an example of a conditional, which we'll get into more tomorrow.
This is for the viewer to see, this kind of syntax, because this code will work the same if we do this. Well, not if we do that, okay? Jeez. This code will work the exact same. But as you can tell, this is a very simple if-else statement, and it is already not impossible to read, but it's uncomfortable. JavaScript will read this the same, your program will run, but no one else will know how to use it. So whitespace is ignored. You use it as the user to make it easier to read your code and organize it. Cool. So camel casing and whitespace. When you are, let's look at another example of how to use whitespace appropriately. Which one of these is easier to read? Just on, you think the top one, but you're being a, whatever that word is, difficult. No, it's space it out. So you're going to be using a lot of arithmetic as far as plus, minus, divide, or you'll be comparing things together, like is A equal to B? If you have it like this, does the same thing as far as JavaScript is concerned, but it's not as easy to read, especially when your code gets condensed. So space things out. Make it easier to look at. Again, things like this, part of the convention is opinion, so you'll find certain instances where you may not need to space things out, but general practice, space out your code, it's easier to read. Yeah, like for the sake of JavaScript objects, which we'll talk about more in a moment, it's denoted with the opening and closing curly brackets. You can give objects properties and values, like this person object is going to have a property called name that's equal to Joe. And if I want to give another property to this person object, I need to give it a comma, and now I can give it a new property and assign a value to it. This object would work the exact same. And for one or two properties, it may not be too bad, but pretend we had 20 or 30 properties to this object or more and more. You don't want to be doing this. It's just bad. Let's see. So instantly, when you put them on their own lines using your white space, you get this nicer looking object. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say on spacing things out for now, but I will remind you if I'm helping with your code and I can't read it. Semicolons. So we got white space, camel case, semicolons. So this is more and more opinionated now because JavaScript used to break without that semicolon at the end of certain statements. So declaring like a variable, you'd end that line with a semicolon. You do this for functions, when you're making objects, arrays, anything like that, you'd put a semicolon at the end of your statement. JavaScript now works fine without it in most cases. But I think it's best to learn with that convention, as you'll see many examples online still use it. And so once you get more comfortable with it, start making your own kind of style and such, you can look into removing that or not, but I'd stick with it to start off. Keep your semicolons clean. Yes. Now the braces. Who has done programming in something other than JavaScript, so like Python, C++? Okay, so there's a couple of varying experiences here. For those that have, you've probably written code that when you need to open up your braces for like what's going to be the code to run. They actually put it on their own line, and then you put your code in here. This is not correct in JavaScript. While it may be correct in other languages, it's not JavaScript. The opening bracket should go on the line of what you're declaring. So as far as like a function would go, you would put the opening bracket there. Just make it easy, write out all the syntax, and just hit enter between your brackets, and you're set to go. But you don't want them on separate lines. It starts getting messy. It looks like an object. All right. I know we're kind of breezing through these because they're just basic concepts, but really, if there's any questions, let me know. 25 or different. Oh no, we're just going over like 5 or 6 of them. Yeah. These are like the main ones. It's going to make your code look clean from the get-go. You'll pick up more over the time, but sticking with these. Okay. This one is probably my favorite, naming. You'll often say the hardest part of programming is naming your functions or naming your variables, trying to figure out what to call them. I can't give you much advice on what to call them as far as it's going to vary depending on your program, but I can tell you what not to do. Let's say you're making an app for books, and you're like, okay, var books is equal to, and we'll use these brackets to denote an array for now. We'll go into this in a moment. We're like, all right, this is books. You know what? I know what I'm talking about. I'll just make this B. Okay, so now B equals books in my program. Later down, you also are selling blankets, and you're like, I can't shorten this, so I'll call this B2, and that's my array of blankets. This is a headache and probably an anxiety attack waiting to happen. So I would always name it what it is. Again, it might seem like straightforward. I'm naming it what it is. You might, you get 20 or 30 variables deep into a program. You're just kind of rushing to the end of it. Always stick to the convention. It's going to be easier to debug. It's going to be easier to look at. Name it what it is. That's
So
it.
in terms of naming, if you have to name something and you want to change it later, isn't there a way in code that you can actually change all of them as you go through each individual line by changing the main variable?
Yeah, so if you use a variable and it's not changing, the name, and then you're referencing it other places, you would have to grab all instances of where you're naming it because that's where it's being used. But you can grab words that are the same. Like if I highlight books and hold in Command and press D, now I've grabbed both of these. I can play with them. Is that what you were referring to? Yeah, so that shortcut is holding it Command and pressing D. You can grab, but the problem is if I had things named B, it's going to grab all instances of B. Not really helpful. Sure, there's a plugin for it. If you know of one. Okay, don't do it. Okay, so let's go into the data types of JavaScript now. So we're already kind of touching on a bunch of them, but let's clearly define what the data types are, what they're generally used for, and what some of the things we can do with them. Data types. Who can give me a JavaScript data type? Number. It's another one. Strings. Arrays. Okay. Object. It's another one. Boolean. Okay. Oh. NaN. Yeah, it's not a. these are the main data types. There are data that you use such as not a number, null, and undefined. But these are the ones built into JavaScript that you can use. So a number, literally it is the numerical expression of some sort of value. So it would be like this. So var my num equals 56. If I were to do this though, what does that change this to? String. Okay. It's a string of characters. And you notice my naming convention. I know this data type is a string, so I'm going to call it my string, or str, or string for short. String is a reserved word, so you don't want to use the full one. Okay, let's see here. So we've covered two. Well, let's actually move this one up. So I want to cover these first. So these top three, number, string, and Boolean, which we'll go into, are called the primitive data types. And Boolean is nice. It's either one of two. So my bool, and what are one of the two values this is going to be set to? True or false. Or else, sure. Yeah, so this is great. Booleans are used a lot, especially for toggles, switches. You want something to be one thing or the other. Well, here's your data type to use for that. It's always going to be one thing or the other. These are primitive as they point to a single point in space and memory. They don't hold complex data, which is the next type of data. And the complex data types are the arrays and the objects. Let me scroll down here. So at first, it can be a little difficult to decide whether you want to use an array or an object. Arrays are best for lists of things, especially if you want them ordered in a specific numerical value. So let's say var thing, let's do names. And an array is denoted by the opening and closing square brackets. That's how you know it's an array. And they are indexed by using a comma. So my first one will be Frank. This is the first entry of my array. I want a second entry, I can add another. Cool. Nice things about arrays is they are indexed, meaning they have a location specifically inside the array that you can access. So if I wanted to just get Frank's name out of here, so if I were to console.log names, I will get the whole array. But I just want to console log Frank. So to do that, you say in the array, so in the array brackets, who can tell me what index number Frank holds in this list? 0, okay, cool. A lot of this is probably review. We'll see. Frank, yeah, exactly, because arrays in JavaScript start at a 0 index. You haven't heard that before, it takes a second to get used to it, but it makes a lot of sense once you start playing with arrays. So if I wanted to console log Lisa's name to the console, I would put Justin. What number would I put in here? 2. Here we go. JavaScript's an interesting language in the case that it will accept any data type in an array. So other languages would frown at you highly for this, but you can do this in JavaScript. This array will not cause any problems. It's still going to console log just fine. But it's not suggested. Because a lot of these times you're going to be looping through arrays, checking each index, and if they're different data types, it's making it a lot harder for yourself. So an array should be a consistent data type inside of it. Okay. So lastly, objects. We know that arrays are great for indexing things. Objects are great for defining things. So let's define a person like we did before. And objects are denoted with the opening and closing curly brackets. And objects contain key value pairs. So you'll always give the key first. So the key for this, we could give it a key called name and set it equal to its value of Frank. Objects are accessed similarly to arrays. As far as arrays are indexed, objects have these these keys that you access. So if I wanted to console.log the name, let's see, use this tool here, Chris N. How do you think, what would I write in here to console log this name? You can always phone a friend. Let's do it. Person.name. There we go. So this is one of the two ways to access the key in an object. Yeah. Defining specific things, especially things you're going to use over and over again. So like this person, we could have an array of person objects. They're indexing all the persons. But this is something we could use over and over again. Okay, so say age now has an age key. So there is another way to access, I could say person.age here, right? But there's another way to do this. Person bracket age. Nope. Thank you. Person age. Okay. This is a way to, similar to indexing of arrays, but without the numbers, you're actually accessing the key as a string. Specific use cases to begin with, the dot notation is what you'll be using the most. But just to show you, there's two ways to access contents of an object.
So does that mean libraries are kind of like objects since you have to use on something like the library?
Yes.
I think, I'm not sure I understood it, but if you understood what he asked.
Like we're doing like math seal or whatever it
Yeah.
is, that would technically be a library. I mean, the library would technically be an object.
Yeah, yeah. When you think of like node modules, we'll talk about that more. When you're importing other people's code to use in yours, they're imported as objects. And yeah, and you're accessing it like this. So objects are great because they can hold strings, they can hold numbers. Is alive. True. Yes.
Why would you prefer to use the console log versus console log?
That goes a little deeper than we want to right now.
Okay.
So
in the future, people understand why you
yeah, it's hard to get like a specific use case without going into a little bit more content. Just to show you that there are two ways to access an object, but all the assignments we're giving you right now, you're just going to be using the dot notation.
with the better practice method would be fine.
No, you'll use the dot notation the majority of the time. Yeah. So this is a convention as well. When you're naming a variable that's holding a Boolean, make it ask a question, like is alive. I mean, alive would work as well, but if you put is in front of it, everyone who's a programmer and sees that key or that variable will know this is supposed to be a Boolean, because they're either they are or they're not. Cool. So what's another data type that I could put inside of this object? We have a string, a number, a Boolean. Yeah. So maybe friends. This could be an array of friend one. He doesn't have real friends, so he just got placeholders for now. Yeah, you spotted that. It may be a little bit stranger. You can also have objects. So like his address could be an object. Now we're getting a little deeper here. We're putting an object in an object. But it's being accessed. If we wanted to see that object, we're going to access it the same way as we got his age. We can just say console.log person.address. So we'll put street in here maybe. 1, 2, 3. Street. Let's do that. City. Let's see. Cool. What's that?
Like if you wanted to pull specifically street or city, it would be person.address.street.
Yeah. Perfect. I was just about to ask that. So right now we're console logging person.address. So if we wanted to get the street or the city out of here, we're just going one piece deeper into the object. We add another dot and ask for the information we want from it. So let's get the street, and we got it there. Lastly, this one we won't go into much, but objects can also hold functions. So say something can be equal to a function, and then you write your function right in there, and it's going to be accessed the same way as we're doing this. Just to show you why these are called complex data types as opposed to very simple data. The more you use it, the more that is clear. Yeah, these are the main data types we'll be working with. Yeah.
Just go back down to the bottom where you started. Okay, so just stringing it on with the dot.
Yep. Go deep, and that's because this is an address. But here's a good quiz. Let me just call someone random here. Chris P. If I wanted to console log friend2, what would I have to write in here? Yeah.
So you tell it to console log person dot friends, and then square bracket 1.
Exactly. Right? So we use the dot here because we're trying to access a nested object. Now we're trying to access information in an array. So we're using that same bracket notation that we used up here. Cool. Good job. Yeah, let me comment these out. But if I run it, friend2. So I didn't mean to like downplay the reveal. It did come out as. Yeah, so when we'll go into Node more tomorrow as well. When you install other people's code, they'll come in as objects, and those objects contain all the functions that you're going to use from their code. And so I could access this function. So let's see an example of this just for the sake of example. Let's have this console.log hey. So now to call this function inside of the object, how would I call that function actually? Let's give another shot here. Renata. Say something, yep. And then what do I need to put at the end of this to call a function? Yep. We won't actually need to console log it because the function itself is going to console log for us. No, that's great. Let's try it out. Hey.
Oh, that's sick. So you don't have to console log.
Right, because my function is console logging.
Right.
Yeah.
So technically, because the function is nested inside of an object, you have to do object function. You could have multiple functions, so you have object
Yep.
function 1, object function 2.
Exactly. That's, yeah. What?
So just curious, if that's still work,
Yeah, let's see what it does. I think when you console log a function, so we'll do it without the parentheses first, it'll literally just give you the function. It's like, hey, this is a function. With parentheses, it's just going to give us hey. And then this is a quirk of console logging in functions. It gives you a little undefined, which this is always showing here, but we got an extra one because we're console logging the function call that's console logging. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Yes. Oh, yeah. For sure. Not sure if that's today. No, it's not today, but it is coming up. Cool. Yeah, so this was just meant to be an overview of the data types so you're familiar with how they look and how they mainly work and how to access them, especially. So getting the last name here using the brackets, or in objects using these dot notations. We have your first project. This one, grab it here. This first project is to get you used to looking at code and to fix it. So we're going to give you, let me pull it up here. So you are going to be given this bit of code. And you need to go through it to find any sort of syntactical errors. The majority of it's going to be syntactical. So are the variables being used correctly? Are they being assigned correctly with the equal sign? Are operators being used correctly? Are things misspelled or called with the wrong name elsewhere, with typos? And are they calling with the best conventions? Are things well spaced out? Is it easy to read? So what you'll need to actually do is clone down the repository that holds this project and fix it. Once you get it working, you then have to pass it off to one of us instructors. We'll look it over with you, make sure it's going, and that's how you'll pass off this first project. Grab this. Yeah, you won't be pushing anything up to it. You'll simply be cloning the repository, which is basically like if I went to one of your GitHubs and cloned your assignments repository, it would be on my folder, but it would not be affecting your repository. It's like my copy of your repository that I can now do whatever I want with. So this is how, these are the commands you'll be using to get this onto your system. So I would go into your assignments folder, open up your terminal, and run this because it's going to create this Daily Planet Editor folder for you and put all the content inside. Yeah, so your project must pass code review with the instructor or TA. We'll specifically be looking for fixes to the things mentioned in the bullet listed that we talked about. And yeah, don't go overboard. Yeah, fine.
Just to clarify, we're doing this in the projects folder, right?
Yeah, this is project numero uno. Yes, sorry, if I said clone into assignments, clone into projects.
Spaces or tabs?
Tabs.
So people like to use that space.
You like to do one space? Well, we have our tabs set.
Right. But that's what I'm talking about. Even though they're spaces and tabs. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to make sure that I've got the terminal correct because I need to continue to practice on that.
Okay.
So I put the rm space -rf dot get, and it tells me directory not empty. Is that correct? Is that where I should be right now?
So it should be rm space -rf space dot get.
Yeah, the first time I did it wrong. The first time I just did the -r space get dot get.
Okay. So if you
And-
go into your projects folder, do you have the Daily Planet Editor folder in there?
Oh, let me, hold on. So I do open space dot, okay. How do I get my projects folder without open or without, where are you opening?
Sorry, what was that? Without opening which one?
Yeah, so from here, I would hit open space dot, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to open it in your Finder.
Oh, in Finder.
Yeah, so open will open up your whatever folder you're on, just in Finder, so you'll get it like this. But then you could dig into assignments and then projects to see if it's in here.
Projects, daily project, daily planet editor.
Cool.
And I have a paper.js and a readme MD.
Perfect.
So this is where I should be?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Exactly
you.
right. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, when I opened this, it opened in brackets. Should I just delete brackets so that it will always choose Visual Basics? Oh, I just need to drop it.
Yeah, if you can drop it over to VS Code, or I know there's a way to set the default. Let's see. Yeah, you shouldn't have to delete it.
Visual Studio. Open with.
So then you figure out all the we need what? We need to go for active. User. It's right there. It's actually it says you cannot rename the zone. You'll never know who got them all. Yeah, that's what's cool. They're like, everyone's like, well, you can go. I don't really need to hire. They always come out of nowhere and people that. I need to coach 40 of this. I need to come to live every night while everybody else. That's what I thought. Very simple. Yeah, math, not math.
Hey, when you guys are done with this, and we're still going to be working on it, but there's another assignment to go over with what we just did with objects that you used writing an object. So I'm going to put that in Slack right now as well. This assignment right here, or exercise. Yep, that's coming into Slack as well.
You want to start on that right away?
Yeah, if like I'm gonna be coming around trying to check your code and stuff, but it's gonna take a minute, so I'll get started on this. You finish after you get. Yeah, I definitely let me know if you're done, and I'll come by. I'm just pushing up to Trello right now. Yeah. Yeah.
And for the grocery store, yes. We're just making a new
Yep, make a grocery store JS probably folder in your exercises. Right for a shopper object. Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe coming around too. So this is the one that just looks good. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Wonderful.
Sweet. You think it'd be a good idea to get some linting extensions?
Yeah, we also use like a beautify.
Yeah, I have beautify on here too. Sweet.
I like not bringing it up right away since I get used to hitting tab.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time, yeah, it's nice to be able to like highlight your code and make it pretty.
Yeah.
But in things like React, it'll do things you don't expect. So.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's great.
And then for the shopping one, I'll go this here. Cool.
Yeah. Sweet. Awesome.
I think I'm ready as well if you're available.
Yeah, give me just a second here and I will. Cool. Are you able to share your screen? I'll stop this share. And let me move this. 1 second here. Okay, so this is yours. Great. All right, so on line 14, the first word, so let's see, yeah, in the parentheses, so it says that is there kryptonite. Are you able to hear me? Sorry, I can't hear you if you're talking. You may have to unmute.